Dear Mother, I hope you will forgive my dereliction of duty in informing you of these events of the past few years. I trust that God Almighty will keep these words safely between us both. You will remember that I finished my studies at Clare College in 1913 and was altogether unsure of Cambridge academic life. I had considered entering the field of liberal politics, though the actions of Miss Pankhurst in February had made me consider that an altogether too hazardous profession. Instead, I thought it far safer to join the Secret Service Bureau, which seemed terribly voguish at that time. Largely because of the kind reference provided to me by Professor Simpson, it was not too difficult to assure myself a place. However, to my surprise, I was seconded to a rather forlorn section on the western coast of rural Denmark, a place I had not considered especially significant in the effort to halt German militarism. Despite my lacking appreciation of my posting's geopolitical significance, and only a passing acquaintance at best with the Danish language, I resolved to make the best of my newfound patriotic career.
Goddag. Alles in ordning? Do you speak English?
Yes, quite right, thank you. It's very pleasant to meet you.
My, very English indeed. You must agree to help me practice. Mr.
Brythelwaite. It's Christopher Brythelwaite.
Eva Hauser.
A pleasure, Miss Hauser. It would be a delight.
Very good. Shall we say the cafe by the church tomorrow at 11 o'clock? Wonderful. Best of luck with your pastry purchasing, Mr. Brythelwaite.
Brythelwaite. Of course, Eva had very little need for any tutelage in the English language.
My father was a businessman in Chicago and then in Leeds. I was tutored in England and America. We only returned home very recently.
Well, I mean, your English reflects far better practice than mine, Miss Hauser.
Please, Christopher. But you must tell me what brings you to Denmark. Surely there's need for such flattery back in London.
In hindsight, Eva's excuse for being in Denmark, that she had some desire to become a painter and had heard of the curious light that plays off the coast of Jutland, was close enough to the truth for it to be a convincing alibi. I was less prepared. Well, I work for one of the larger bakeries in Kensington. There's been a feeling in the firm for some time now that the British market for cakes and other things of that nature is really rather saturated, and that we would be better served if we were to expand our operation overseas. They've really rather sensibly, actually, sent me ahead to gather the information on the Danish pastry situation, commercially speaking, as well as to gather information on prices and shipping lanes and other things of that nature. Waiter. That was, of course, not the last I saw of Eva.
Good morning, Mr. Brythelwaite. I hadn't thought you much of a beach-minded person.
Really? Well, I hadn't thought you much of a beach-minded person.
Really? Well, I was planning to take a walk.
It's very good, Miss Hauser.
Pray tell, Christopher, what are you doing?
Shipping lanes, Miss Hauser. I'm watching for ships.
Oh. Can you see any?
Yes?
Where?
There.
Where?
There.
Ah. Christopher, how are you intending to tell the purpose of these ships?
Now, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, presumably it matters whether that is a fishing boat or a trader returning to port laden with foreign pastries.
Yes, I suppose it does.
Well?
Well, it is in fact the case that we're particularly concerned by a bakery which is headquartered in Berlin. And if they were to take their wares to this part of the world, our plans for expansion would be frustrated.
I see.
So...
How are you going to tell whether it's a German ship or not?
Look, Miss Hauser, I have a complete list here of the colours, signs and markings of German pastry-bearing ships of that nature.
Of course.
So...
And is this a ship of that nature? Very good. Well, I shall have to get closer and inspect it for myself. Good day, Christopher.
The next day, she came with a pair of field glasses for me and set up her easel next to where I was watching the sea. We settled into a kind of rhythm, Eva and I. In the mornings, I would watch the sea and she would paint it. Sometimes I would describe the ships I saw and she would paint them, giving her advice on what nationality she thought they might be. We would then proceed to the small cafe by the church to enjoy a late lunch and spend much of the afternoon wandering the small town we had come to inhabit that summer in 1913. Sometimes we would return to the beach to watch the ships or the sun setting over the grey sea. In time, it simply became easier to let her read my observation orders directly, rather than try to rely on her intuition for whether the ships she sketched were those I was looking for. In fact, she soon came to author, or at least co-edit, the majority of the reports I sent back to London. I'm not now entirely certain when I became convinced that she must also be a spy. And to be entirely honest, I cared very little. She taught me a good deal more about our profession than I should have learnt any other way. And at the time, the concerns of His Majesty's government seemed very far away. She also gave me a great many gifts. Not least, a fine, medium-sized watercolour of that beach we visited so frequently, which I came to treasure. I had come to love her very much. Then one day, she vanished. She had only the time to leave a very short message for me, though long enough and certainly tender enough that I have no wish to reproduce its contents in this letter, dearest mother. She had also left me the remains of 2 unfinished miniatures she'd been working on, one of each of us. Although I have since lost the bulky landscape, I have kept those small sketches on my person ever since that day. It was, of course, not long after that I received my recall orders. Major.
Yes?
There was something that I believe I neglected to mention in the report.
Yes.
There was, you might say, a woman with whom I had quite close relations while abroad.
Yes, the German. Yes, we know all about her.
You do?
Of course. Jolly good job with her, by the way. Ingenious to tease out the details like that.
Indeed.
Yes, a good old reverse honey trap operation. With any luck, your leaked information will have entirely bamboozled the Germans as to our plans in the North Sea. You don't think, dear boy, that we had any genuine interest in the wholesale prices of those snail shell pastries, do you?
No. No, of course not.
Jolly good. I suggest you return home for a few days. Things are heating up now. We should be in touch with a new assignment shortly. Oh, and Mr. Brythelwaite, well done.
And I did just that. Of course, it was demeaning to have it revealed that I had been no more than a pats for the intelligence services. I was, however, quickly distracted from my feelings by my new assignment. I should, to a certain extent, be grateful that my role in the intelligence services kept me away from the greater part of the danger of the Great War. And it was also good of the SIS to allow me to return home in time for your passing, particularly with the perilous state of international affairs in 1917. Of course, I never forgot Miss Eva Hauser, although in hindsight it was obvious that this must have been a pseudonym. And even if it weren't, it was impossible to track her down, despite my contacts within the European security establishment. For all I knew, she was rotting in some French jail. I eventually resigned my role in the security services. With the Treaty of Versailles signed and no desire to brave the cold to report on Lenin's government, it seemed like my role had expired. With the war concluded, I was able to return to that little town by the sea that I'd fallen so in love with, and wait for my perfect spy. I'm still watching the ships. Your loving son, Christopher.